Bicentennial means 200 years, which is about how long this thing felt to watch. So, Patreon sponsored review time, and I don't know if the sponsor in this case thought that I looked like I hadn't been getting enough sleep and wanted to give me a sedative or what. So Bicentennial Man. Allow me to apologize right at the beginning to anyone who enjoyed this movie or is nostalgic about this movie or what have you. I'm not trying to take away from your enjoyment, but whoa. Man. Okay, where do we start with this thing? Well, it's not exactly a beloved classic, and it's not exactly new. It's funny, this movie to me, I have strong memories of the last 5 minutes or so of this movie because I worked at a movie theater my senior year of college, and it was playing. And we used to have to go in to the theater for the last few minutes to try and get people to go out the front if there were people waiting to come in the other way, down at the exit down at the front of the theater. And so I've seen the last 5 minutes a lot. It didn't make me want to watch the rest of it, but here we are. So, okay, Bicentennial Man is a film starring Robin Williams and a few other people as well, Oliver Platt, Sam Neill, and a few other folks. But he's the big draw. He's the one who's in it the most by a country mile. And it is based off I think it was a novella by Isaac Asimov called The Positronic Man. And it's one of Asimov's many stories sort of dealing with robots and artificial intelligence and the 3 laws of robotics and what it means to be human or to have consciousness or sentience and all that kind of stuff that Asimov tended to deal with in his writing. So the plot is it follows basically what is intended to be just an all-purpose home appliance. It's a home service android. In this case, one who has been named Andrew. And it follows him as he starts to display creativity and curiosity. And as time goes on, a much more overt desire to feel and then ultimately also be acknowledged as and regarded as a human being. And this happens in the film over the course of over 200 years, I think. It's the title of the friggin' movie, you moron. Over the course of about 200 years, which means that we're also dealing with multi-generations of people that he's interacting with. And the movie runs about 2 hours and 11 minutes. And it feels longer. I don't know what it was about the late 90s in terms of overly long, overly draggy, contemplative, what does it mean to be human movies? Because just the year before we'd had Meet Joe Black, which I think, to be fair, was worse than this was. But, man, I don't know. I don't know what was in the water in the late 90s. But in any case, so, oh God, how do I even begin to talk about this thing? Okay, let's start with a few things. The first half, when Andrew is still visibly a robot, is by far the stronger half of the film. The latter half, when he gets, skin placed over his casing, and from there on he just looks like Robin Williams, it is far less compelling. Because even though Williams does a pretty good performance all through it, And even when he looks more human, he is retaining, at least for a while, because the idea is the character is actually becoming more human as he goes. But he retains for a while still the fairly robot ways of moving, which is actually kind of interesting to watch him do at first. But as it goes along, eventually it just feels like you're watching a late 90s Robin Williams, the sort of melancholy comedy kind of things that he was doing around that time. It loses its uniqueness once he no longer looks like the robot. And even looking like the initial look for Andrew, honestly, is pretty cool. It's a pretty cool look. It works pretty well. And then about, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes in, he gets his first visual upgrade where it's sort of like he requests an alteration to his facial features so that he can express more, and suddenly his face looks slightly more human. But it's just a serious uncanny valley effect, and it looked honestly like when it showed up, I was like, I think I actually went out loud like, it was unsettling. And Robin Williams, he tries. He tries with this, and his performance isn't bad. Pretty much everybody else is giving a very wooden performance. Some slog through a little bit better than others. I mean, Sam Neill does okay because there's a certain sort of authority to just the way he speaks, but he just kind of has that as a person. Oliver Platt's pretty likable, but I find him just to be likable in general. The love story is a little bit... It is both contrived and a little bit creepy. So, first of all, so far as I could tell, because I've never read the original source material, I couldn't find a reference to a love story as part of the original Positronic Man narrative. So this looks like something that was inserted into this film. And I think in a lot of ways, it hurts the film on multiple levels. The first is that I feel that it cheapens the motivations for Andrew to do sort of the final push, because the big thing towards the end is he's replaced his internal workings with artificial organs, and he's got skin and all this other stuff. But until he makes adjustments that will actually cause his positronic brain to start to age and decay like a human's would, he is effectively immortal. And so he won't be recognized as a human for as long as that's the case. And what kind of gives him the final push is being in love with this woman who he knows isn't going to last forever. And honestly, I personally feel like funneling his introspective journey of personal just fulfillment is cheapened by tying it to, and he did it for love. Like, that bugs me anyway. Especially when the thing is not necessarily about that. I mean, I suppose if you wanted to say that this is primarily a love story, you could make that argument. But if that is the case, it's a creepy friggin' love story, because the woman he ends up marrying and falls in love with is the granddaughter of the child he was originally serving as a robot. Quote unquote, Little Miss. So Little Miss grew up and also very clearly kind of had a weird kind of crush on him. And then later on, when Andrew goes, he goes on kind of a personal journey. He gets his skin, he comes back, and then he meets Little Miss's granddaughter, who looks exactly like her, because of course. And that becomes the love interest. And I'm sorry, that's kind of creepy. That's like marrying your old babysitter, but times several factors of weird. And it's not the fact that somebody fell in love with the machine. I can kind of roll with that, but the whole no, I'm sorry. I find that not to be pleasant or romantic. And like I said, I don't think it helps the narrative anyways. So if the love story was the point, I don't think that was a good idea. And if it wasn't the point, well, the love story doesn't help the overall story. So there you go. There's that. I feel like in many ways this could just be called Old Age Makeup the Movie, because basically every single actor in it eventually ends up slathered in old age makeup. Sam Neill gets it, Robin Williams gets it, Embeth, oh God, I forget her last name, but the woman who plays both Little Miss and then ultimately Andrew's wife, she gets it. Even like incidental secondary characters we see get super old. There's this really weird sub-tangent with this one other robot from his model that was discontinued that Andrew finds. And it's a girl robot. And I don't know if I wasn't paying close enough attention. We only saw a handful of other robots besides Andrew prior to that, but they all looked like Andrew, which led me to believe his is the standard model for this thing. But then he sees her, and she's got breasts, and a waist, and hips, and this squeaky feminine, like, okay, you know what, I won't even go off on the voice because it's established that Oliver Platt owns her. And it's established, like, he had assigned a personality to her out of the options he had available. So I'll let the voice pass. But why is she built like that? Why? Like, especially because, like, it's established that like, it tested weird for consumers the more human the thing seemed. So why would you give, like, some models, like, these weird, superficial, very human secondary sex characteristics? Like, just one line that was like Oliver Platt's character had modified her so that she just looked a little different. That would have been one thing, but no. I'm just supposed to assume that, yeah, they made a weirdly sexily proportioned version of this android that's meant to just be an appliance. I mean, that's like making a blender with curves. Like, why? Why would you do that? Hey, God. Like that, I think that moment kind of broke me a little bit. The other thing, this one, pretty sure I swore out loud when I heard this. So, last month, I think it was last month, I did my video for my favorite movie soundtracks of all time. And number one on the top of that list was the Braveheart soundtrack. And I mentioned even at the time of praising that soundtrack that I am well aware that James Horner had a tendency to plagiarize himself, which is something that's always bothered me about him, because hearing familiar themes that I know come from another movie takes me out of things when watching movies that he's done the composition for. Now, I had never heard him aping any of Braveheart before. But then there's a wedding scene early on when Little Miss gets married, and the music is very slightly altered version of the princess's theme from Braveheart. My favorite soundtrack of all time, repurposed and recycled, and yeah, that ticked me off. Yeah. I don't have anything more to say about that. That just really ticked me off. Ugh. So, all right, God, is there anything else I want to say about this? I mean, I get what it was going for, and honestly, I can even see sort of more meaning and more relevance behind what it's doing now than I would have seen at the time if I'd seen the entire thing when it came out. Because there is, in theory, if you had laid the theming correctly across the whole thing, there is some potential power in those last moments where he is basically standing before the the ruling authority of this now future society, and saying that, I just want to be recognized for what I am. I just wish to be acknowledged. I don't need acclaim. I just want you to acknowledge to me that I am what I know I am. And speaking as a member of the transgender community, as someone who's gender fluid, who's part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum, and who, goes through that to a certain degree and has a lot of friends who have been going through things of that and seeing that go around, there's potentially a fair amount of power in that. The problem is that theme and the themes in general are not actually woven into the story. They are the story. The characters just sit down and talk about the themes. It's not subtext. It's not an undercurrent. It's what the film has instead of a plot. Because this film is a premise followed by 2 hours of very obvious progression that you could guess where it would go just based off the title, and many scenes are just built of characters sitting down and talking about what the thing's about. And you can get away with that in 1 or 2 scenes, just to make the point clear sometimes if you do it well. But for as often as it happens in this, and how blatantly it happens, and how shallow a lot of the supporting characters are just to make the point stronger, those ending notes that should have connected with me, given my background and the things that I care about, it just didn't, because I didn't care. And, to give you an idea of how clunky this thing is, I think it was about 6 minutes in. So anything Asimov has ever written, well, not anything, but most of his science fiction have at least featured, if not heavily hinged on, his 3 laws of robotics. 6 minutes in, unprompted, non sequitur, Andrew, having just been turned on, says to Sam Neill and his family, "Would you like to know the 3 laws of robotics? I have a presentation." And he then proceeds to give. To give you an idea of how clunky this is, the specifics of the 3 laws of robotics actually never really come up as a focus of the plot. It's just dumped as exposition. And that's the thing. The film, people don't have real conversations in this. It's like that. It's like that clip from Futurama of the robot devil getting really mad at Fry's opera. "You can't just have people say how they feel. That makes me angry." That's what it felt like for a decent chunk of this thing. It's well-meaning. It's harmless. It's got some cool effects. The robot effects are pretty good. The old age effects are sometimes good, sometimes not. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's harmless. But for me, knowing that I tend to like AI stories, whether it is AI sort of coming into a consciousness, things like Ex Machina, or just really well depicted AI that isn't sort of making a question of, is this thing sentient, but is presenting a really wonderfully well realized and fully rounded character that is still a robot, with characters like Baymax from Big Hero 6 or the robot from Robot and Frank. So there's things in here that I should like, but I don't, because I was bored. Bicentennial Man, the 200-year-old movie, year-long movie. Guys, I was trying to be snarky and I blew it. That's how much this thing is just kind of... My brain dribbled out my ears a little bit. No, that's cruel. It's, like I said, I don't think it's good. I just don't. But it's It's harmless. I got a little worked up there because there were a few things that really did niggle me, but looking at it as a whole, it just kind of is what it is. Bicentennial Man. Yeah, this is some of the higher support tiers on Patreon. You can dictate to me what to watch, and some people have me watch something that they think I'll like. Some people have me watch something that they like and they want to see my opinion. And I think sometimes they just toss me things to see if it breaks me. What do you think about this movie? Whatever you thought, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. A whole bunch of stuff to do because there's buttons and links, including one to the Patreon, which I've already mentioned. And there's a whole bunch of other links besides. So check them out if you can, if you want to even. But if you don't, that is okay. Because at the end of the day, you are the council. And I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.